Hello and welcome back to our channel. If you love powerful, emotional stories that inspire and move your heart, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on a notification bell so you never miss a new story. Now, sit back, relax, and let's begin today's journey. New York City, on a quiet spring morning, its towering skyscrapers seem to reach for the clear blue sky. Car horns, hurried footsteps, and the aroma of coffee from street vendors blended together to form an unspoken symphony unique to Manhattan. Isabel Monroe stepped out of a luxury condominium near Madison Square. She wore a light brown wool coat and carried her familiar cello case. Her face was gentle, her fair skin glowing like morning dew, but her blue eyes held an unnamed melancholy. As the only daughter of real estate magnate Henry Monroe, Isabel had lived a life wrapped in silk and privilege. She had everything, except the right to live on her own terms. While her peers pursued degrees in business, law, or medicine, Isabel chose music. Specifically, the cello, a classical instrument she fell in love with the first time she heard it at a performance in Carnegie Hall. Her father never supported her decision. "Music won't feed you," he often said. "It's just a pastime for the wealthy after dinner." But Isabel had never been one to obey blindly. Even when her father cut off her financial support, she persisted, attending Juilliard on scholarship and making ends meet by tutoring. That morning, instead of going to class as usual, Isabel walked toward Central Park. It was her favorite place to find inspiration and practice her own compositions. As she walked, she watched the crowd rushing by, as if the world spun endlessly while she alone slowed down, searching for something she couldn't yet name. In the southern corner of the park, under the shade of an old oak tree, a small crowd had gathered. A raw, tender guitar melody filled the air. Isabel paused, curiosity drawing her closer. A young man sat on a bench, cradling a weathered guitar, his tousled hair falling over deep brown eyes. He wore a faded hoodie and ripped jeans, and his voice stopped Isabel in her tracks. Unlike other street performers who craved attention, this young man sang as if telling a story meant only for one person. It was an original ballad about parting, hope, and longing. Each word, each note seemed to come from deep within his heart. Isabel stood motionless for a long moment. When the song ended, a few people clapped and dropped coins into the open guitar case. But she didn't walk away. Instead, she stepped forward, opened her cello case, and sat beside him. "May I play with you?" she asked, her voice soft as the spring breeze. He looked up a little surprised. Then he smiled. "I never turned down a cellist, especially not one as beautiful as you." Isabel laughed, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like Miss Monroe. She felt simply like a music lover. They began an impromptu duet. Liam strummed the guitar. Isabel accompanied on cello. Their sounds intertwined, gentle as spring rain, then rising like ocean waves. More passers-by stopped, enchanted by the unexpected harmony. After the song, they stayed and talked like old friends. Isabel learned his name was Liam Carter. He had once studied music in Boston, but dropped out due to financial hardship. He'd come to New York a few months ago, earning a living performing on the streets and occasionally teaching music to kids in low-income neighborhoods. "Singing on the street isn't the dream," he said, "but it keeps me alive. And more importantly, it keeps the music alive." That line struck something deep in Isabel. For the first time in her life, she met someone who truly understood why she had chosen the cello. They began seeing each other more often, sometimes in the park, other times at street corners in Soho, or even playing together in a small Harlem cafe. Each time, Isabel felt her heart expand. Layer by layer, the shell built by years of expectation began to crack. One late afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows over the Empire State Building, Liam walked her to his tiny Brooklyn apartment. It was barely 300 square feet, far from luxury, but it overflowed with music, jazz posters on the wall, shelves packed with handwritten scores, and an old, upright piano in the corner. Isabel looked around and smiled. "You have more than I expected." "Not much money," Liam said with a grin, "but enough dreams." He pulled her close. They shared their first kiss in the golden light of sunset, surrounded by melodies and the scent of old paper. Neither of them knew this moment would be the start of a storm. The days that followed passed like a gentle song. Isabel had never felt her heart so light. Every afternoon, after her practice sessions at the academy, she would find her way to Liam, sometimes in the park, sometimes at a small cafe with a balcony draped in bougainvillea, where they played music for random passersby. She didn't love him for his voice or sweet words, but because he was the first person who saw her for who she truly was, not the daughter of Henry Monroe, but Isabel, a cellist in search of freedom. Liam often composed songs, and each one had a part written just for her. They blended in music like two contrasting colors that made each other brighter. He, from society's margins, she, born into wealth. But when they played, there was no difference between them. Still, the world outside was not ready to accept a love like that. One early June morning, while Isabel was in her practice room working on Dvorak's concerto, she received a call from her father's personal assistant, Mr. Walker. "Miss Monroe, Mr. Henry requests your presence at the office immediately," he said, his voice cold, offering no explanation. Isabel felt a knot in her chest, but could guess why. She quietly packed up her things and took a taxi to Monroe and Associates, the towering headquarters of her father's real estate empire. The large office door swung open. Her father was already seated behind his desk, back straight, face stern, eyes as sharp as steel. On the screen in front of him was a video clip, one of her recent public performances with Liam in the park, filmed and posted online by someone. Isabel didn't speak. Henry closed the video and turned to her. "Is this how you protect our family's name? You may not like it, but I did nothing wrong," she replied calmly. "Nothing wrong." He stood up abruptly, his voice rising. "You're the sole heir of the Monroe legacy. You're seen playing alongside a street performer who lives in a cheap Brooklyn apartment. Are you trying to destroy both your future and our reputation?" Isabel froze, but then took a deep breath. "I love him." Henry scoffed, his eyes filled with contempt. "Love doesn't exist in the real world, Isabel. Only power and wise choices do." She said nothing. A storm was gathering inside her. The next day, Henry personally went to Central Park. Isabel followed close behind, her heart racing. When they arrived, Liam was singing a sorrowful tune, his guitar whispering with the wind. Henry marched straight toward him, his hatred barely concealed. "You're Liam Carter?" he asked, his voice cutting. Liam stood up, nodding politely. "Yes, I am." "Stay away from my daughter," Henry snapped. "Who do you think you are? A dropout? Surviving on spare change? You're not worthy of her, and you never will be." Liam looked him in the eyes, not trembling, but with a quiet bitterness. "I never wanted to be part of your world. I just love her." Henry's lip curled. "She'll forget you soon enough. Once I take her away from here." Isabel tried to step in, but Liam shook his head gently. "Thank you for showing me the truth," he said to Henry. That day, Liam walked away from the park without a word of goodbye. Isabel tried calling him. No answer. Her messages went unread. He had vanished, as if into thin air. She returned to her apartment and cried harder than she ever had before. It felt like she'd been ripped from her only safe haven. But what she didn't expect was what came weeks later: morning nausea, dizziness at the smell of coffee, and a missed period. Isabel discovered she was pregnant. She didn't know what to feel: joy, fear, or despair. The baby was the result of her first love, but now she was alone. The child's father had vanished without a trace, without a word, without a reason. She had no one. What she didn't know was that Liam had come back. After storming away from the park in anger, Liam wandered the city aimlessly. He didn't sleep that night. He had planned to leave New York for good, but just one morning without Isabel made him realize he couldn't live without her. The next day, he returned to the places they used to meet. She wasn't there. He went to her apartment on the Upper East Side, a place he had once hesitated to approach. But as he stood in front of the building, a man in a black suit, cold and expressionless, blocked his way. "Miss Monroe doesn't want to see you," the man said flatly. "She's realized it was all just a passing illusion. If you keep trying to find her, there will be consequences. You're a nobody. No one will protect you." Liam didn't believe it. But when he tried to call Isabel, all his numbers had been blocked. His texts went unanswered. Even one of their mutual friends in the music scene said, "She's gone, Liam, and maybe she doesn't want to be found." A war raged inside him. He couldn't believe she had changed so suddenly. But he also knew what Henry Monroe was capable of, a man who could ruin anyone's life with a single phone call. In the end, Liam left. He carried his broken heart with him. He chose to disappear, believing it was the only way to keep the woman he loved safe, even if the cost was losing her forever. The news of her pregnancy struck Isabel like lightning. She stood still, staring at the test in her trembling hands, 2 pink lines undeniable. In the days that followed, she lived in a state of overwhelming uncertainty. No lover, no safe place, and a tiny life growing inside her that she had to protect. She knew that if her father found out, he would never let it be. He would force her to terminate the pregnancy, or take the child away, or worse, use it as leverage to chain her to the future he had planned in the business world. She couldn't let that happen. That very night, Isabel packed a few belongings, took the small amount of cash she had saved, and left her apartment. She turned off her phone and cut all contact with her former life. All she carried was a backpack and a fragile new life inside her. She headed to New Jersey and stayed with an old classmate from the conservatory, Sarah, for a few weeks. There, Isabel began composing again, earning some money by teaching cello to children in local neighborhoods. She lived simply, quietly, trying to disappear. The months passed. She started to feel the soft kicks and the sleepless nights as the baby moved inside her. Every evening, she would place her hands on her belly and whisper, "I will protect you, no matter what." But that peace didn't last. One late afternoon, as Isabel left a music lesson, she noticed a strange car parked down the street. A knot tightened in her chest. She quietly turned into a narrow alley to avoid being seen. Moments later, Sarah called her in a panic. "Isabel, a man came looking for you. He said he's your father. He told me your mother is dead and that you're ruining your life." Isabel's heart pounded. She hung up, rushed home, and packed again. That night, she left New Jersey. This time, she went to Philadelphia. She rented a tiny room in a rundown neighborhood, changed her name, forged new documents, and found work at a community music center. She tried to live as a normal person, leaving no trace behind. But Henry Monroe didn't give up easily. Even without direct contact, he hired private investigators to chase every lead. For Henry, this wasn't about love, it was about control. He saw his daughter's actions as a mistake, and himself as the one who must fix it. By her 8th month, Isabel struggled to breathe. Her belly had grown heavy, and she stopped working to rest. She spent most days indoors. At night, she would sit by the window, thinking of Liam, the man who hadn't appeared since the day he vanished from her life. Sometimes she wondered, does he even know he's going to be a father? But whenever sorrow crept in, she would gently hold her belly and say, "As long as we're together, everything will be fine." Then, everything unraveled. One gray morning, as Isabel folded baby clothes and prepared her bag for the hospital, there was a knock at the door. She opened it a crack and felt her blood run cold. Henry Monroe stood there. Same expensive suit, same icy eyes, but now he carried a new weapon, the authority of a father. "You can't keep running like this," he said. "I don't need your protection," Isabel replied, placing a protective hand over her stomach. "That child needs a future. It can't be born in this cheap room, raised in poverty and chaos. Come home, Isabel. Let me take care of you." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. She could not trust this man, the one who destroyed her love, as the safe place for her and her baby. Without another word, she fled through the back door. Rain was pouring, soaking the streets. She moved fast, then ran, clutching her belly, feet aching, mind in turmoil. At the corner of 2 empty streets, a truck turned sharply and couldn't stop in time. A blaring horn, a scream, impact, darkness. Isabel collapsed into a puddle, unconscious. And within her, the child was just moments from being born. The steady beep of a heart monitor echoed softly. The sharp smell of antiseptic filled the room. A harsh white light filtered through her half-closed eyelids. Isabel opened her eyes. Her entire body felt as though it had been torn apart, nerves screaming in every limb, her mind floating between dream and reality. But the emptiness in her abdomen was what jolted her upright. My baby? Her voice was raspy, her hand trembling as she reached for the hospital blanket. A senior nurse quickly left to fetch a doctor. Minutes later, the door opened, and in walked Henry Monroe. He was wearing his usual elegant suit, silver hair combed neatly, face composed as if nothing had happened. But as he approached his daughter's bed, his eyes softened, or rather, he was attempting to perform some imitation of fatherly concern. "Isabel, you're awake. Where's my baby?" she asked immediately, nearly shouting. Henry remained silent for a few seconds, then sat in the chair beside her, placing his hand gently on her knee. "Isabel, the baby didn't make it." A suffocating silence fell. The room froze. No, that's not possible." Isabel shook her head over and over, tears already streaming down her cheeks. "I felt her kicking. I heard her heartbeat at every checkup. The doctors said she was healthy." "No." Henry bowed his head slightly, lowering his voice. "You suffered serious injuries in the accident. They had to operate immediately to save you and the baby. But she wasn't breathing when she was born. They tried. They really did." Isabel could no longer hear anything. She screamed, writhing in bed, fists pounding into the blanket, into her own chest. Her heart felt crushed, her soul torn apart. Everything around her blurred through tears and sedation. She cried out, "Give me back my baby! Give her back to me!" Henry called for the doctor. Isabel was sedated and slowly slipped into a forced sleep. But the truth was, the baby had not died. After the accident, Isabel was rushed to the emergency room in critical condition. Doctors performed an emergency C-section. A baby girl was delivered, fragile but breathing. In the chaos that followed, Henry Monroe arrived at the hospital with a team of lawyers and private doctors. He pressured the medical staff to release the child into his custody, claiming the mother was not in a state to decide. And then, he did the unthinkable. He gave the baby to Liam. In a private meeting in the hospital parking garage, Henry handed over the infant, his voice cold and unwavering. "If you still love my daughter, stay out of her life. Forever." Liam looked down at the tiny girl in his arms, his heart breaking. He had returned as soon as he heard about Isabel's accident. He had waited, hoping for the chance to see her again. But instead, he was given a child and a threat. "I don't trust you," Liam said, holding the baby close, "but I'll do whatever it takes to protect my daughter." Henry said nothing more. He turned and walked away, leaving the young man alone in the shadows, clutching the child with tears welling in his eyes. Isabel, under the sterile white lights of the hospital room, had no idea that her daughter was alive, and that the man she loved was walking away with her child, keeping a silent promise to protect her at any cost. Isabel was discharged from the hospital 2 weeks later. She returned to the Monroe estate in silence. No friends, no flowers, no warm welcome. Everyone in the house, from the maids to the driver, looked at her with a mix of pity and unease. They had been instructed not to mention the baby. She was the mother who lost her child, and silence was the only way to maintain the illusion. Henry acted gentle. He hired an in-home therapist, arranged for a special diet, and even sat with her each afternoon to talk. But all Isabel could feel was a wall of glass between herself and the world. She was like a shattered doll placed back in its cabinet, wiped clean on the outside but empty within. Night after night, she dreamed of her daughter, a baby girl with soft brown curls, deep blue eyes, and a tiny, delicate cry. In her dreams, she reached for the child, only to wake up in tears with empty arms. One day, while searching through old music sheets in the basement archive, Isabel stumbled upon a stack of documents hidden in a drawer of an old filing cabinet. They were hospital papers, discharge forms, billing receipts for the C-section, and a copy of her medical file. On one of the pages, she noticed a handwritten note. Newborn breathing weak, transferred to NICU at 5:47 a.m. She froze. Sweat broke out on her forehead. Her heart pounded as if her body itself could not deny the truth. Her baby had been alive at birth. And then, all the doubts she had buried since waking up in that hospital bed burst through the surface. Her father's flickering gaze, the way he would quickly change the subject whenever she brought up the baby, the nightly sleeping pills he insisted she take. She climbed the stairs, trembling, and entered Henry's private study, a room that was always locked. That night, for the first time, she broke the lock to his drawer. In the bottom compartment, she found a thick envelope. Inside was a copy of an adoption document for a baby girl named Emily Carter, born on the exact same date as her delivery. Emily Carter. Her heart stopped. She nearly collapsed, her hands trembling as she pulled out the photo attached. A baby girl peacefully asleep in the arms of the man she could never forget, Liam. She burst into tears, not from rage, but from the crushing weight of betrayal. Once again, Henry Monroe had stolen the most sacred part of her life. But this time, she would not remain silent. The next morning, Isabel left the house without a word. She didn't look back, didn't take anything with her except a new phone and the hospital file copies. She found her personal lawyer, someone who had once helped her with a music contract, and told him everything. He forged medical records, she said firmly. He stole my child. I want her back. The attorney was stunned but nodded. We'll start with the name Emily Carter. The search had officially begun. The search began with one name, Emily Carter. Isabel and her lawyer combed through adoption records within a 100-mile radius of New York. They meticulously reviewed hospital files, medical centers, and private adoption agencies. Each time she saw a girl around the right age, her heart swelled with hope, only to be dashed again and again. 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, many months. She barely slept more than a few hours a night, surviving on coffee and silent grief. Then, on a rainy afternoon, her lawyer brought her a breakthrough, a private adoption record signed under the name Isabel Monroe, but the signature was a digital copy, not handwritten. The child had been placed with a guardian named Liam Carter. Isabel went numb. Liam, he had been raising their daughter, and he hadn't abandoned her. He had been forced to disappear, just as she had been forced to believe her child was gone. The very next day, Isabel traveled to a small town in Vermont, the address listed in the adoption file. It was a quiet rural area, with scattered houses, rolling green hills, white picket fences, and the warm smiles of strangers. She rented a car, driving along leaf-covered roads, her heart pounding so hard she could hardly breathe. The house appeared after a bend in the road, a white wooden cottage with a small porch, vines of bougainvillea by the window, and the soft sound of piano music coming from inside. Isabel stopped the car, pressed a hand to her chest, and tried to steady her breath. She stepped out, walked quietly toward the window, eyes fixed on the scene inside. A little girl, about 1.5 years old, sat on Liam's lap. She had soft brown curls and striking blue eyes, the same eyes Isabel had as a child. Liam was teaching her to play the piano, gently guiding her tiny fingers, his smile full of warmth. A moment that felt like a dream. Isabel wept silently, the kind of tears that come not from anger, but from a love that had been buried alive and was now stirring back to life. Liam heard footsteps on the porch. He stood and stepped outside. Isabel was there, standing in the rain, thinner than before, but her eyes still burned with the familiar strength he remembered. They stared at each other for a long moment, saying nothing. Months of silence, of misunderstanding, of longing, collapsed into a single gaze. At last, Liam whispered, "I've dreamed of this day." Isabel choked back tears. "And I always believed you'd never abandon your child." They embraced. No explanations, no blam. The little girl, Emily, ran out from inside and looked up at them curiously. Isabel knelt down, arms open. Emily hesitated for just a moment, then ran into her embrace. The world exploded into joy. Isabel chose not to make the truth public. Not yet. She wanted to protect Emily's peace, and Liam's too. the man who had done the right thing, quietly. Together, they hired a new lawyer to restore her parental rights, re-register Emily's birth certificate, and slowly begin to undo the web of lies Henry had spun. She did not confront her father with hate, but with maturity. She had nothing to prove, only a life to live on her own terms. One early autumn afternoon, Isabel played her cello again. Emily sat beside her, holding a tiny bow, while Liam strummed his guitar. Music filled the house, not for performance, but for healing. A trio of hearts once broken, now in harmony. Autumn wind rustled through golden leaves, carrying with it the scent of dry grass and peace. Isabel sat on the porch of the wooden cottage, gently stroking her cello. Emily slept quietly in her arms after an afternoon of running through the yard. Liam was mowing the lawn in the backyard, occasionally glancing at them with a contented smile. The three of them had settled into a quiet life. No luxury, no excess, but full of love. Isabel chose to stay in the small town, leaving behind the glittering city, the pressures, the expectations, and the lies she had once been forced to live by. Sometimes she performed at small local theaters or taught music to children. Liam continued to teach piano and compose. Emily grew each day in the warmth of both her parents, a bright, curious girl with eyes that seemed wiser than her years. One day, while Isabel was teaching a class at the local music center, a stranger walked in. It was Mr. Walker, Henry Monroe's former assistant. He looked older, humbler than she remembered. He quietly handed Isabel a letter and said simply, "Mr. Henry wanted you to read this. There's no demand, just he felt it was time." Isabel opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, bold and clear. Henry didn't apologize, nor did he plead. Instead, he shared stories of his youth, how he had once been forced by his father to become the heir, how he had once loved a music teacher but was forbidden to marry her, and how he lost her. "When I saw you holding a cello for the first time, I was afraid you would repeat my story. But that fear made me act like a tyrant, and I lost the most precious things in return." At the bottom, he wrote, "Emily is the one thing I've never had the courage to face. But if you can forgive me, allow a grandfather the chance to meet her, just once." Isabel read the letter over and over, tears falling, not from pity, but because he had finally admitted he was human too. The following week, Henry Monroe came to Vermont. No bodyguards, no chauffeur, just an aging man with silver hair standing before the white wooden door, holding a small basket of toys. Emily hid behind her mother, eyeing the stranger with curiosity. Liam stood by Isabel, alert but calm. Henry crouched down and said softly, "I'm Henry. I'm your grandfather. I brought a little gift." He presented a small wooden box. Emily looked up at her mother, then hesitantly stepped forward to open it. Inside was a tiny doll dressed as a conductor, holding a baton. Emily giggled. Isabel looked at Henry and gave a quiet nod. "You can stay for dinner." That night, for the first time, they sat around a table together. No talk of the past, no mention of mistakes, just Liam's vegetable soup, Emily's laughter, and soft music after the meal. A year later, Isabel debuted her new composition, Symphony of Dawn. The concert was held in a small theater in Vermont. She conducted the orchestra with Liam on piano, and, most special of all, Emily standing beside her, holding a tiny bow, adding her first notes to the world. In the front row, Henry Monroe sat in silence, clapping gently as each movement unfolded. No longer a tycoon, just a father, a grandfather, a man learning to love through quiet presence. And when the final note of the symphony rang out, followed by a thunderous applause, Isabel knew with certainty the old chapter had ended and the dawn had truly arrived.